Okay, so the idea of this video is to explain with a very tiny example how fragments work in Android. Fragments are these kind of placeholders for components or just simple classes that can do things in Android. But let's talk about them as placeholders for components. Since they're placeholders for components, you can embed them in an activity, right? And you might ask, well, what's the utility of that? Well, imagine if you have two windows, two screens, right? So that's two activities in Android. And that's because you want to go from one to the other, right? Now, the minute this is displayed on a tablet, then you have to change your program and actually create one activity that has a split screen that can display both things that you were looking at before, because the screen for the tablet is so much bigger, you don't want to waste real estate space there. Well, what happens with fragments is that they're independent of the activities, and we're going to code them in a way that it's absolutely independent of the activity. All right. So then what happens is that for your tablet, you code your one activity, and then you say, hey, for this tablet or for this orientation, embed both fragments in the same activity. So fragments are reusable components, and they should be tightly coupled with activities, but in a way that you can change the fragment and make it live in any other activity. Okay, that's the advantage of fragments. As this again, as I said, this placeholders for components that you can then move from activity to activity, and you can associate many fragments to um, to a single activity or however you want. This you can also group components that have a specific functionality together this way, and pack them in a screen or disaggregate them. But let's go and look at fragments. So I'm using the Android App Studio here, but it's basically so similar to Eclipse. There's almost no. If you're using Eclipse, this won't seem very foreign at all. Well, let's create a new project. I'm going to going to a menu that you can't see, but it's File, New Project, and we'll call this application fragments example. Okay. Let's call the module name will be fragment example, and it's always a good idea to change this from com example to, I don't know, com fragexp. Yeah, okay. Fragment example, this is just any package name, and it's going to go in my whatever directory. These are the common systems, minimum required. Very few people have that, so I'm just going to start from 4.0 on. And this, you can select theme. We'll just hit next. Now, we can choose an icon. We're just going to leave it as default. We're going to create a blank activity, okay? And the main activity, we're going to call it the button activity, or the master. I'm going to call it master in detail. The master activity. There will be an activity master and a fragment master for the layouts. No navigation type, I'm going to create that. And I'll say finish, and it'll create the project for me. All right, so the project is being built. It takes a little while for it to build the project. I'm not sure if that's my computer or just the way this works, the App Studio. Anyways, let's analyze what we have here. We have my master activity, and we have in the layout, so I have my activity master and my fragments master. Okay. So now let's create the layouts. Okay. I'm going to create a new layout file for the detail. Okay. So I'll just right click, new layout resource file here, okay, and I'm going to call it fragment detail, okay. I'm creating it under the layout directory, and here's my fragment detail, okay. Now my fragment detail, I'm only going to have a text like just a simple label, right? I could drag it from here. Let's look at this text view is a plain text view. I'll just drag it here. Whoops, new text. There it is. Okay, let's look at the text here. There's a tab underneath that you can't see, but here it is. Okay, text view, and then we'll it's pretty much, we'll call it text view. That's fine. Let's call it details text. Detail text. Okay. Just for the purpose of this tutorial, it'll be details text. I'm also going to create a new layout file. Oh, well, I'm going to modify the master layout file, my activity master. Okay. I have to double click here, and I will add a button to this. By the way, you can see in App Studio how my phone's looking, because I have chosen the Nexus 4. So in my activity master, I'm not going to use the the frame layout. I'll use a linear layout just because, and I'm going to add a button to it. Okay, so I'm going to do it like this. Okay, so I've created a linear layout with a button that says press to update. We'll just call it update. Okay, just update. So we have my activity master, my fragment detail. With this new text over here, I can actually, I'll move the text design. I'll move the text some other place. Well, let's see. Let's see if I can move the text just by changing some of its attributes, and you can see that. So the text will say new text. That's fine. We'll center it. How about that? So layout gravity is center horizontal, and then center vertical. Okay, help is coming up. Now I'm going to add a margin at the top. So Android layout margin top right there. Okay, and then it's going to be 20 DPI, DIP. I'm sorry. DIP. These are units that are, no matter which phone, these are relative to the resolution of the screen, so they will always stay the same. And say the text size will be I don't know, 25 DIPs. Okay, so now it's very visible. So this is my fragment details. I'm saving things as I go, and my master is here with an update button. Now what I want is to show these two views side by side, these two fragments side by side. Okay. In order to do that, I want to go to whoops, my activity master is wrong. I meant to put this in the fragment master. I don't even want to use activities, I want to use fragments. Okay, that's the fragment master, fragment detail. In the activity, okay, the activity master, I'm going to put both side by side. And the way to do this is I'll create a linear layout. You can do this also just by changing the graphical design, but I think it's just faster to show it this way. I'll create the linear layout, a linear layout here, and I'm just copying and pasting from the project, which I've done already. So a linear layout with two fragments, one fragment, second fragment, okay? And the first fragment, okay, I'm going to call it list fragment and detail fragment. Now, the class here will be the fragment. The fragments are also reflected not only as a XML component, but also as a Java class later on. So later on, I'm going to create a class. Later on, I'm going to create a class that's going to be called master fragment. Okay. And then later on, I'm just going to copy this whole path here. And later on, I'm going to create another fragment that's going to be called detailed fragment. Okay. So the important part here is that in the activity, I will have both fragments. And you can see this reflected here. You'll have a little warning in the Android app suite. You can ignore that, but we'll see one fragment here, one fragment here. Okay? And we'll see which fragments go where. So let's create the classes right now. So let's go and create the detail fragment. I'm in this package. I'm going to create a new Java class called detail fragment. Okay. Now this Java class will extend fragment. Okay. We'll extend fragment. If I select things from the list, the imports are automatically added. And what I'm going to do is, well, let's see if this, I'm going to go here and just to show you how similar this is to Eclipse, you can go to generate, and this will have certain methods. So I'm going to override some of the methods here. I'm going to override the onCreateView. So onCreateView, okay, I'm going to override that one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create view equals, remember I have to return a view, so I'll create here what I'm going to return. And then I'm going to use the inflator. This is basically to make layouts available to your program. Inflate r.layout.fragment detail, right? And then container and false. Okay, so container comes from here, and false is just a Boolean variable at the end of the inflator. So basically, I just brought into my program the XML file that contains the fragment detail layout. Okay, and then I'll just return that. Return view. Okay. Now this fragment, the detail fragment, remember it had a text component, a text view attached to it. So I'm going to create a method public void set text string item, and this is going to have, I'm going to get a handle of a text view. Text view, I'm going to use get view, which is going to give me this layout dot, and then find view by ID. See, I did a difference from the activities that I do not set out a default layout. Here I have to first get the layout with get view and then find view by ID. And then this is our ID details text. Remember, that's what I called it in the XML. You can come back and see that. Now it says that this symbol has not been found, so I control space that, and it suggests me all the classes called text view. I just hit on the first one, and that'll create the imports that I need. And then this view, right? Remember, view is this text view now. View set text item. So basically, I look at the text view from the XML file, and I set the text of it to whatever item is. Okay, that is my details view. That's all it's going to do. It's going to have a text view, and it's going to update it. Now, let's create the master fragment class. Okay. Now the master fragments class is going to have a button, and when pushed, the text is going to update to something. So master fragment. So master fragment will extends fragment, right? And of course I have to import it. All right. Oops. Fragment. Okay. Android fragment, yes. There you go. Create fragment. Sorry, I had a little trouble with my keyboard there. I'll extend fragment. And this is something we're going to cover now is something interesting. What I want the fragments are attached to activities, right? So one thing that I want is my activity, okay, to have a method. It's to interact with my activity via an interface. In that way, this fragment is decoupled from the activity, but because it demands an interface, the activity will have to comply with certain protocols to actually, or with certain methods to actually interact with my fragment. Okay? So let's look at this. So I'm going to create an interface here, an inner interface, public interface on item click listener. Okay? And on item click listener, we'll have one method, public void on item clicked, okay, and then string with some, it'll pass some string text, okay, text. Now that's an interface that I declare. And what I want to do then, I'm going to override the view on create view for this, which is again one of the initial methods. You can defer to the slides to see what do these methods do. Also, this tutorial has been taken from vogella.com in a huge amount, so you can see there also other explanations. Let's override this method. So generate, override methods, and then I'm looking at on create view. So on create view, there you go. So I'll just override this method. And what I will do here, I'm going to create a view called view that's equal to inflator, inflate, r.layout. This is my master fragment, fragment master. Okay. Container false. Container false. All right, so I've got a handle on the master fragment layout file. Now it has a button, right? So button, I'm gonna button btn or button update will be, and then I use the view find by ID r.id button 1, right? That's actually the ID of the button if you go to the XML file and look at it. So I have that. Now I'm going to add an on-click listener to this button. Button.set button update dot set on-click listener. Okay, new view dot on-click listener. That is something that comes with Android. If you just type view dot on-click, and then the autocompletion should suggest this, and this structure is created for you. So this is basically what we do here is what happens on an on-click. Well, on an on-click, we're going to call a method to actually update the other fragment, the detail fragment. So we'll call it update detail. Okay, it hasn't been created, that's why it's red, but we'll create it. And then after this happens, we return the view. So let's review this method really quickly. In the onCreate of my master fragment, I get a hold of the fragment layout. The button that's there, I also get a hold of that button. And then I will set an onClick listener. So I'll say, you know, if that button is clicked, well, update detail will be called. Okay, and that's the view that I return when I create this fragment. Now, here's the let's look at the Unattach update detail. So public void update detail. Okay, update detail with nothing. What this will do is it'll just, you know, create a timestamp. String time will be string value of system dot current time millis. This system current time millis just gives you the milliseconds that represent the time right now, and this will just convert that number into a string, and that string is called time. Now, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this. I'm going to send this data. Okay, I'm going to send this data to the activity. Now, how do I do that? And that's the key. That's a key point here. To send it to the activity will need to know. To send this value to the activity, I need to call a method on the activity, on the other activity, the one that has the detail, right? I can't link directly to another frame. I have to talk to the activity first, and the activity has to call the frame that it has. That's how it works. Is the frame, to send a message from a frame to another frame, I first have to send the message to the activity that's holding the other frame, and that activity updates its own frame. Okay? That creates an extra complication. And that is why I created an interface on item click listener, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, if you want to be an activity that's going to hold this fragment, you must implement an item click listener. Therefore, therefore I know that I have this function, for example, guaranteed in that activity. So assume I have an activity that is of the type on item click listener that implements that interface. Okay. So I'm going to create a private variable on item selected listener. No, on item click listener. On item click listener. Okay, my interface right there, and I'm going to call it the listener. Okay, and this listener is going to be an activity or anything that implements an on item click listener, but it will be an activity, assuming this is my activity, okay? The activity that controls the frame in which I'm going to do the update. So then in the update detail, after I got the time, I can say listener, and I know that I have the on item clicked method, right? And I'll pass the time to that, okay? So I assume this is going to be an activity that's going to call this method. And this method in the other activity should take care of looking at its frame and updating the text field on that frame, on the fragment. I'm sorry. All right. One more thing here. I'm going to override another method, okay, that comes from fragments and actually links them to an activity, okay? So let me override the Unattach method. Unattach attaches this fragment to an activity when it attaches to an activity. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call super unattach activity just to be safe, and then if the activity is an instance of an on item click listener, okay? If the activity is an instance of my interface, okay, then my listener, right, this variable, this global variable that I have, will be the activity. So on item click listener activity. So the activity that's been passed when the fragment attaches, this activity that's been passed, I'm going to check whether it's an instance of on item click listener. If it is, then I'm going to cast it to such interface, and I'm going to assign it to listener, which is this variable over here too, and which is the variable that then I call the method on item clicked. Okay. One last thing, of course, is this one. If you're not an instance of the listener that I'm expecting, then I'm going to throw an exception. Throw new class cast exception. And then I'm going to just, in the message, I'm just going to do activity to string, and then must implement on item click listener. Must implement, actually, this is master fragment on item click listener. Okay, so I'll just throw that exception in there, and that is 1, 2, 3. Oh, what's going on? Oops, here. There you go. All right. So that is for attaching the fragment to the activity. Once the event is detected in the activity, I'm going to update detail, which will go to my activity and call a method on this activity. Okay. Now, we'll see how to update the detail of that activity next. So now, let's look at the master activity now. Remember, the master activity is the one that's going to have the master fragment. So let's do this. The master activity, there's a lot that we won't be needing, but so for example, I don't need this placeholder fragment code because I do have a fragment. These have to do with the menus. We're not going to worry about those methods, but we're going to worry about this one, the onCreate. So for the onCreate method, I'm going to do the super onCreate. I'm going to set the content view to the activity master, and that's where it'll end. Okay, it's very simple. Now, let's look. We can delete this. If your wizard created these things, we can totally delete those methods as well. Okay, and then the other method is I'm going to do public void. Oh, a couple of things. So a couple of things here before I go too far. This master activity extends activity, but remember it must implement the interface. So implements master fragment dot on item click listener, right? That's the interface that it will implement. Okay. Now it's all red because the master fragment on item click listener demands certain methods. So let's implement the methods. On item clicked, that's the method that I need to implement, right? So on item click, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the detail fragment. Remember, I have a detail fragment. I'm going to call it df for detail fragment, and that's going to be detail fragment casted, and then get fragment manager. This is an important part of fragments too, because it's just like the layout manager in a way. And I can find fragment by ID. And remember, we called this detail fragment. Okay, when we created it in the layout, we call it detail fragment. All right, so that's my detailed fragment. Now, if the fragment is not null, basically there's something, and the fragment, okay, and the fragment is in, and the fragment, yeah, is in layout. That's another method there, but if df, if null, and df is in layout, okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say df.setText, and then the text that's been passed to the onClick item text. Okay, so in this activity contains the master fragment. If someone calls the onItem click listener with some text, what will happen is I'm going to find the detailed fragment and I'm going to update its text component. Okay, I'm going to call its setText function. Now, so let's run this and see what happens. Okay, I do have a running instance of Android here, so I hope this is going to be faster than usual. So this is asking me, where do I want to run it? In that emulator that I have running, yes. And it comes up. So if I say update, the milliseconds should be up there. Update again, that's different milliseconds. Please review this, and the next video will show you how to put it in portrait mode and separate the fragments and put them in two different activities.